about grammar and how we talked about punctuation and using it properly at the end of sentences, so using question marks and periods and exclamation points properly. Well, this time we're going to be talking about commas. So we're going to go over, first of all, I'm going to give you kind of a couple different types of commas, and then we're going to go through some examples on the slideshow, and then I'm going to ask you guys for help with some of the examples that I have. So there's four main types of commas. There's the listing comma, which is probably the one that we're all most familiar about, and it's literally when you're listing something. So in the example, my favorite foods are pizza, chocolate, and cookies. If you didn't have all those commas in between, so after pizza and chocolate, it would be pizza, chocolate, and cookies. It wouldn't flow as nicely. And then there's also the Oxford comma, which I have an example of on the next slide, but that's basically the same thing. I'll go more into detail about that later. The joining comma is where you have two clauses or two sentences that you want to put together, because as you can see, he turned his homework in on Tuesday as a perfectly good sentence by itself, and it was not due until Wednesday as well. But if you wanted to combine the two, you'd put a comma in between, and then you need a word after the comma, like but or and or yet. The bracketing comma, this one is kind of tricky, kind of can be confusing sometimes. The sentence, Jupiter is the largest planet and Pluto the smallest. Basically, the point of the bracketing comma is that you don't want to repeat yourself. So you could say Jupiter is the largest planet and Pluto is the smallest planet. But just to kind of eliminate all of those words, you can just add that comma right there and add the description. So finally, the gapping comma. This literally goes in between the sentence and the commas form a gap. So the sentence, my grandpa never let me go to Starbucks, makes perfect sense by itself. But in this case, maybe I wanted to add a reason into there. My grandpa hated coffee, which is why he didn't let me go to Starbucks. So you would add a comma on either side, and it's literally fills in the gap. Any questions about any of those? So this is an example of the Oxford comma, which I was kind of telling you about. So pretend like you're talking about a party. We invited the rhinoceri, Washington, and Lincoln. So three different people or things. Without the Oxford comma, we invited the rhinoceri, Washington, and Lincoln. So without that one comma right there between Washington and Lincoln, it kind of makes it sound like you've named the rhinoceri, Washington, and Lincoln. And actually, this is kind of tricky because I've had teachers in the past who are perfectly fine with students using or making a sentence without the Oxford comma. And then there's even some parts of the world that don't mandate that, even in English, which is kind of ironic, I think. They don't use the Oxford comma. So it really kind of depends on the teacher, but in my case, I think it makes more sense to use it. So the next example of why commas are so important. When did Rachel Ray start eating people and dogs? So this is an actual magazine. Somebody found it on the rack somewhere, but you can see she finds inspiration in cooking her family and her dog. Obviously, we need some commas here. Can anybody tell me what kind of comma we need to add?
Listing comma?
Yeah, very good. So we want to add, to separate her different inspirations, which are cooking, comma, her family, comma, and her dog. Just to kind of clear it up a little bit. So that's a real life example. That can obviously, I mean, it's not just, students that make mistakes. I bet most of you probably wouldn't have made that mistake. I think that's probably kind of embarrassing to those editors. So then we're going to do, this is a sentence from an article in the New Yorker. Jamila is a big apple-cheeked, endearing person. So I'm going to give you three different examples of where commas could be placed in here. But we really want to kind of pay attention to the importance of placing commas in the right spot. Because as you can see for this one, for example, she's a big apple-cheeked, endearing person. Saying that somebody's a big apple, not only does it not make sense, but it could be kind of insulting depending on what adjectives you're using. So tell me what you guys think. Does the comma work right here? Not so much. Okay. So the next one, we could use a listing comma. We could put it after every single description of Jamila. So she's a big, she is an apple, she's a cheek, she's an endearing, and she is a person. again, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I would say it's closer to what we're going for, but this is the one that I think makes the most sense. It kind of accurately describes each element of her personality, and hopefully is the least insulting out of all of those. So now I want you guys to help me with some exercises we're going to do together. Mixing ones up. Can everybody see that okay? That's a little blurry, isn't it? How's that? Is that better? Yeah. Alright. Okay, so here's an example of a sentence I got at the store. I got a toothbrush, cereal, cheese, and milk. So first of all, who can tell me what kind of comma that we need in this sentence? Do you remember?
Listing?
Yeah, very good. And then can somebody else tell me where we need the commas?
After toothbrush,
Okay.
cereal, and cheese.
Yep, very good. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions about listing commas? No? Okay. And then remember, again, with the Oxford comma, if we were using that, we wouldn't have the comma right here. The reason that I like the Oxford comma is because this kind of makes it seem like cheese and milk is its own thing, maybe a brand of something. It doesn't really separate it well enough, I don't think. So, good job. That's the first example. So, the next one. Okay. Sorry about that. Alright, I'm going to try and read it without putting commas in there, which is kind of hard to do sometimes. But Frederick ran on his head slightly higher than usual. First of all, does that sentence make sense at all, as it is? Not really. So let's say we put the comma right here. Does that make any more sense? Not so much. Physically, I don't think it's possible for somebody to even run on their head, so I don't really think that that's the best place for the comma. Can anybody think of where the comma should go? Yeah.
After on.
Yeah, very good. So maybe he is running out of school, he just got a good grade, so he's kind of holding himself a little higher. So that's exactly where the comma is supposed to go, so good job. Does anybody have any questions about that one before I move on? Alright, so the student said the teacher was upset. Does that sentence make sense by itself without any commas? Yeah, it does. But what if we wanted it to be what the teacher is saying about the student? Where would we want to add the comma? Or commas? Any guesses? Yeah?
After student.
Okay.
And after teacher.
Yeah. Yep. And then, of course, you'd want to add quotation marks right here and here, because it is the teacher talking about the student, but just for this example, we were talking about commas. So, very good. What's an example of what kind of comma? Anybody remember? Yeah.
Gapping.
Yeah, very good. Alright, and then one last one. Alright. Come to the table and eat, Jessica. Does that sentence make sense by itself?
Good.
Arguably, yes. It could, but if we wanted to save Jessica's life, where would we want to put the comma? Yeah?
After E.
Yeah, very good. So now, we're actually asking Jessica to come to the table to eat instead of saying, we're going to eat Jessica when she comes to the table. So, very good. All right, thank you all for your help. This little exercise was just to show you that you can find this maybe in newspaper articles, magazine articles, even most likely on friends' Facebook statuses, improper use of or lack of commas, and how it can really make a big difference